what we're trying to do.
I'm hoping you find out much.
If that was the case, we make a follow of a friend.
I want to see you sort of glow and
Okay, so we're
see
zooming,
all these
we're
connections
recording.
together.
this more and more.
Well, there is a historical precedence for that. They're Zerkers.
Oh.
So that's, I think, what you're referring to.
Okay.
You're
And
gonna
they
turn on your
got
mic
into
so I can-
altered states so they could fight ferociously, right?
Yeah.
They took on the skin of Marco Polo. Don't make me wish my M&M. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't know if it's I can hear you.
I have to teach my grandchildren microphone.
How do we want this going?
Oh, not definitely not. You get these fine people down. So I was hoping for technical difficulty.
Did you wear your kilt?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good. Set it and forget it.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester Sunday service. Somerset. A little more laid back, chill, as you can see. What do I do? Gotcha. I'm supposed to like light a chalice. So for lighting of the chalice, I really don't have any pertinent words, but one that I live off of is from the Homopole. It's called Stanza 127. The Homopole is a collection of supposed words about me, and in one of them, be your friend, be your friend's true friend. Return gift for gift, for play, laughter for laughter, and again, treachery, betrayal, treachery, betrayal. Treat your friends as you would yourself. Yeah. A golden rule as far back as 11th BC. So my whole walking down this path of learning about Norse mythology is kind of an intriguing look through history, through mythology, and how modern times kind of like swallows that, regurgitates it into something family friendly, something they can put up a big screen. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. When I say the word Viking or Norseman, what do you think? What's the image at the top of your head? Horn helmets, flying wing helmets, anything else? Hmm? Oh yeah, raiding, invasion. Lindisfarne, the most, precocious kickoff of what we call the Viking Age. Anything else? Bravery, honor. Those were core tenets to their roots. Anybody else? So I like to look at it through three lenses. Mythology, as we understand it today. History, as we can look at it archaeologically, and kind of what the cinemas have twisted it into. So anybody here see the Marvel movies, Thor, Odin, Loki, any of these? Working on almost a blank canvas. So as you may have noticed, I'm wearing something called a Mjolnir, or Thor's hammer. It's kind of a revamped religious symbol. Historically, through archaeological lenses, we understand that it was given as a trophy to women when the men were leaving, raiding, trading, whatever, as a sign of protection, because Thor was a protection of household, family, farmland. So leaving that hammer was kind of your way of saying you were protected when I'm not here. And that was a lot of burden on the family alone. It wasn't just the man going and putting on a big suit of armor and getting on a boat and sailing for a couple of days and then doing his business. This was a contract with a gentleman to get on a boat and go across seas to a possible location for trade, raid, or settlement. The guarantee of coming back with anything that you could actually call a split was not guaranteed. So the entirety of it was left into the hands of the wife. The wife ran the households, the trading, the finances, the slaves, everything. So thinking of that as putting all of your eggs in one basket and going across the seas, when people hear the word Viking, they hear brave barbarians going across the seas. Not always the case. Viking was a job. It's leaving your homeland and going in seek of glory, riches, or a new home. Norse spread wide. I'm talking trade routes as far as the Byzantine Empire, North Africa, Asia, as far as Finland here in what we call the United States today. Massive trade routes included a lot of ideological exchange. So even looking at Proto-Germanic religions, they adopted gods. They put them in their pantheon, not like the Greeks where we just took the whole set, whitewashed them, put our new names on them, but actually adopted their core ideologies into a consecutive storyline. So as history moved along, so did the entirety of their religion. Kind of interesting from that perspective. So, other things that I like to look at is there's a modern revamp of the ideology of an old people because it's lost. It's a lost religion. Most of the tenements that we're looking at include the poetic Eddas, which were songs, traditionally sung, telling great tales of people. Those tales, as fictitious as they may sound, getting in the boat, crossing the seas, and fighting dragons, were actually historically true. Some of them were the inclusion of Greenland, Iceland, and Finland here in America. Those impossible tales actually have a bit of truth to them. So if you start to look at those poetic songs through the lens of history, there's a lot of truth in the ability to go across and gain not only riches, but culture. In the Byzantine Empire, for example, there was actually a trade route that was established for almost 500 years. Part of that wasn't just gold and silver, there was spices and inks, there was also cultural exchange. They were hired as mercenaries all throughout a lot of the empires, but the Byzantine especially because their arms and armament are superior. So there's some neat pop-ups throughout history that happen. Like, has anybody ever heard of the Golden Dome or the runic inscriptions on the Golden Dome? In the Byzantine Empire, and I can exactly find it. Let me find it. There was a mosque that was fought over for about 600 years. It had been a mosque, and then a Christian church. It had been leveled and built back up, captured and retraded, and it was actually a library for the last like 600 years of its life. It's a depository, a trade route. So it didn't matter where you were coming from. Think a mini Library of Alexandria. Part of your trade was writings and knowledge getting that. While they were doing a renovation of it in the early 1990s, they were going through what's known as the Golden Dome, a mosque previously ransacked by Christians, had some ideography put onto it. They noticed that underneath it, the gold reflected through. So they started stripping through with camera lenses and found runic inscriptions along the entirety of the rim of it, describing Ragnarok. And how in the heck did it end up here? So a couple of researchers did some pouring through the poetic Eddas and the sagas and found a tale of a warship that was supposed to go over from Iceland to Denmark to meet up with the King of Denmark at the time, possibly of England, got lost. The sea ended up on the eastern seaboard and was shipwrecked. Bigwig sends his army in to claim whatever lands on his shores. That's the right of the time. If you land on the shores, they get to take whatever they want to let you leave. Well, he sent out a small envoy of about 200 men. One came back and said that there were 12 ferocious men that murdered the entire. So this king, whoa, what? Send out my army. He sends out 1,000 men, 400 of which fled and came back and says, "These men are not being destroyed. We can't do it." So instead of actually destroying them, he sends out an envoy and offers them a job. Protecting. And I will pay you handsomely. This guy's paying gold. So they sign up. They'll get the finances, they'll build the ships back up, and they'll get back home. So they're there until his death, 40 years later. Now the new king comes in and says, "Well, like, hey, you served my father so well, you have a great reputation." Sorry, our contract was with your dad, we've got our money, we've got our boat, we're going back home. And in fact, actually went back to Denmark. It was too late, but it's how far they reached. But when they came back, they carried a lot of the iconography, the social graces of the people. Even what's important. Battle oils were something that were an extravagance. They were actually trading all the way as far as France. So we can kind of say that maybe the perfume boom, like, so I'm just sitting here rambling, just babbling. Anybody, any questions?
I'm not sure what the
So the Byzantine Empire was what we would call modern day Iraq, Jordan, Israel, that entire region that's fought over. Well,
Is Eastern Roman.
at the
When the Western Empire of the Roman Empire fell, the eastern part was Constantinople. It was called the Roman Empire. It fell in 1453. Thank you, God.
better than Google.
On a Wednesday.
It was raining that day, wasn't it?
Well, it was a big deal in Greece.
So
It's based on Constantinople. Is the day of the week, which is Thursday, is that
Thursday.
Is Thursday?
So a lot of Norse words are
Right.
incorporated into modern English. I have a list actually. So Saturday was a cleaning day. That was your fast day. Thursday, Wednesday was Woden's day. So
Oh, that's right.
Woden's day.
Friday?
Frigg or Freya and Frigg are brothers, they're brother and sister. So okay, let's go into the pantheon, shall we? Norse mythology has one of the most interesting origin stories I've ever come across in my study of a lot of religions. You know, there's not like one true God. That then there was light, right? It's a little bit thicker than that. In the beginning, there was a land called Gudengap, nothing, black, empty, and then a land, Niflheim, the land of ice, started to form. Then Jotunheim, fire, and on these two planes grew giants, fire giants and ice giants. And as they started working the metals and forging, the sparks from fire and ice started to fill into the gap and melt and created a humanoid figure named Mimir, a giant. I'm not going to go through all of it because there's literally 100,000 names that are born from. So long story short, Mimir is thrown into the gap of nothingness, decides to take a nap, and in his sweating sleep, children are born, popping out of his armpits and feet as he's sweating them out, and they're starting to war over each other to gain power. 3 of them decide to end the war by stopping the thing they're fighting over, which is Mimir himself. So they kill him, chop him up. Vili, Vini, and Odin, the 3 brothers. They chop him up and create the world that we see around us. How bananas is this? His skull is the sky. His battle wounds are the holes you can see through. His eyelashes create the fence around the world. His tears and blood create the ocean. His bones and flesh create the mountains and the lands that we live off of. Wow. Let's just digest this for just a hot second. The world that we are living in is a plane, one of the 9 many realms that the different gods split up, and they gave us this little piece of earth. They used a god to build it. It's a creationist story that I'm still kind of looking at like, where did this spring from? I mean, ideologically, we're looking at rocks and seeing bones and the grass is growing from his flesh. It's a fascinating creation story from my perspective. But in the beginning of this new land, it's empty. All the gods, Aesir and the other 100 different clans of giants formed their different realms. Well, in order to fit something here, Odin grabbed 2 pieces of driftwood on the beach, ash and elm, and created man and woman and life. Adam and Eve. A lot of similarities there, correct? Looking at their mythology, there is a lot of Christian influence in it. The Hamaval, the Poetic Eddas, the sagas are all written by the end of the 12th, 13th century, when most of the language was oral stories being written down by priests. Or he stores them, the famous one. He wrote them down in very biblical like fashion. One of which being the story of Odin. One of his stories is he removes his eye in order to trade it to Mimir to drink from the well of knowledge and gain knowledge of the world. And he says, well, you can't. What are you going to sacrifice for this? You've got to sacrifice something big for this. Without hesitation, removes an eyeball and becomes the one-eyed one. Another one is another very famous one, Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects all of these different realms upon its branches. There's actually scrolls that go in between all of the giant snake at the roots of it. And this world is fascinating with its mythology. But one of the stories about it is he actually hangs himself upside down from a tree and spears himself in the ribs. And there he hangs for 9 days and 9 nights with no food, no water, and no pity upon him until he looks down into the roots of Yggdrasil and sees runes forming. Magical, mystical language that only dwarves and elves, other creatures can obtain and use. And screaming, he reaches out, grabs them. Flaming words give him knowledge, power, special spells and skills. Very hung across, spear to the side, 100 days and nights. There's a lot of Christian influence. Oda, again, a very similar following and retelling of a story. So the interesting portion that I look at today is there is a new modern paganism coming out of this. And yes, we can look at the history and know that these people slave traders, they were raiders and murderers and mercenaries. But why? What drove them to it? Anybody have any ideas what would drive you to leave your entire life behind, to get on a ship and sail across the seas in hopes of maybe a bit of coin?
Hunger.
Yeah. That's a big drive. You're living the land that's being farmed, overpopulated. You're raiding neighbors for cattle that they raided you from a summer ago. I mean, political strife was rampant. Anything else? What would drive you out? Climate change is actually a very big thing. There's a lot of archaeological evidence to say that there was a CO2 movement that killed off a lot of the plants. Driving off of people, where would you go? I don't know if I can share it here, but I have a map that kind of shows the expansion of what we call the Vikings today through different ages and different colors. Now, it's a little small, but if anybody wants to get up and look at it, there's a key on here. The darker the red goes, the more intense the invasion, more inoccupation. Now, if you look at the time periods that correlate with the expansion, the yellow and green seem to be very far out. They're trading. They're not so much raiding. They're showing up, showing demonstrations of their military might in order to be hired on as mercenaries. They're showing their farming techniques. They're showing their blacksmithing techniques. They've revolutionized a lot of different farming techniques throughout the world. The Rus people in Russia, river people, Rus technically derives from the word of river. So these river people were having issues with their crops, and Vikings knew a lot about drainage because their fjords were ice melt city. So they learned how to deviate water systems around specific pieces of land to increase yield. Because it was a way of showing this is what we can do. Another interesting thing is if you look at back, you mentioned earlier about bravery, honor, loyalty. A big thing, part of honor was name. You know, a lot of your reputation is what lasted beyond you. So some of the big tenements were like to have a family, to have a large family that when you left this plane to go somewhere else, they spread your name, your tales. You may hear of people like Forkbeard, Bloodhair, Ivar the Boneless, these ruthless names that went with some pretty incredible tales. Those names were part of their reputation. They would do great deeds in either battle, or Leif Erikson traveling the seas in order to discover Vineland. The ideology of having your name repeated. Very famously, there's a quote in the Hamabal, how's it go? Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself shall die one day. The only thing that I know that doesn't die is the reputation of a man. Kind of indicating that ability to pass on your name, your deeds onto your children. Your kids were son of. So having that family lineage, that reputation of bravery on the battlefield or the sea, battling the seas themselves, was important to the people. Having your name written down was actually seen to be both a curse and a blessing. So in your lifetime, to write your name on something, to claim ownership of it, like a twinning of your soul, there's a lot of idea into that. Passing on of generational powers or luck was something that was akin to power status. So swords, for example, were known to be reforged every generation after being handed down. Part of a marriage ceremony was, if I were to marry this woman, her father would give me his family sword, and I would give her mine. And then they would be reforged. The way they reforged it is by taking up the ashes of their ancestors, which were commonly held in the household, and forging them into the blade, putting their very deeds and name into the blade, creating very strong swords. Well, unknowingly what they were doing, high carbon steel. To the point where there's actually a legendary sword called the Wolfbert. It was pattern welded, where the blade was drawn out and the inside was scraped out and inlaid with other pieces of metal with the name Wolfbert, kind of like a kitten. It was a brand name sword, highly sought after. I mean, but so sought after that there was actually fakes created. They actually, a modern metallurgist discovered the differences between the pattern weld and the spelling directly correlated to the strength of the blade. Interestingly enough, those Wolfbert blades were one blacksmith, and we can actually trace his bladesmithing from France to Ireland, England, and Wales. We can see the trade route of his knowledge as it spread after his death. So it looks like it was a blade made for kings, was so legendary that it was started maybe branched out to whoever had the coin, all the way to very limited edition sets of daggers, swords, and shields, and then his death. And now all of a sudden fakes are about. And I find that absolutely fascinating that still today we are trying to decipher, figure out how the heck they made steel so flexible that industry standard today can't catch up. They have a purity rate of something like 98% carbon, which is almost medical grade, actually less. So looking at these people as barbarians, these are people that traded technology, not just for a coin, but reputation. I'm panning out here with conversation.
Oh, you're great.
Hmm?
You're great.
Another interesting factoid that I've been learning about, and actually I kind of wish that Cheryl Lachey and Bruce Lachey were here, because they were just at the museum that I would love to go to. In Norway, there is a Viking ship museum. Along the banks of one of their fjords, they found a couple Viking ships and excavated them in the 40s, and found fully clad, what's known as clinker-built ships. Flexible, very strong, recreated for hundreds of years, actually possibly inspired by the track. Well, in I think early 2020, they started excavating an area next to them to actually build an expansion for their new Viking ship museum, and found the largest Viking ship to date at 40 feet long. It's called the King ship. It was not a battleship per se, but large enough to carry over 500 men. And the technology built, the way they built it, hasn't changed per se, but has evolved to make them lighter, faster, stronger, bigger. And they had different styles of that Viking long ship, but with the dragon's heads on them. Barges, river versions, but the ship was so versatile that they can get into any river system and travel as far inland as they wanted to. That was the scary part about them. And actually, stories have it that they would disassemble their ships, climb mountain tops, come over the other edge, rebuild their ship, and take it from the inland. The style of ship being clinker built, meaning you can literally slap a piece on top of another piece, put a nail to it, and feather pattern overlapping with cords of rope and tar in order to make it waterproof. At any point needed to be fixed, absolutely no problem. The lightest ship able, pick it up, put it on the block, repair the piece I needed to, up, ready to fly. So I kind of hope that Cheryl will shape that picture. Want to do an offertory? All right, so part of an offertory, I'll tell you a story. Do I have to do the time, talent, and treasure thing, or just pass this around? Has anybody heard the word Danegeld? Yeah? So one of my favorite stories, and anybody that knows a little of French history, anybody here of Burgundy, France? Anybody tell me the story or the beginning of Burgundy, France? It's from a gentleman named Rollo the Walking. So big, he couldn't ride a horse, so he had to walk everywhere. Shows up as a brilliant warrior with great family lineage, with 1,000 men underneath him, and sacks Paris just to gain a reputation. Goes home, comes back the next season, and the French king is not going to take her, so he throws up his fist and his armies, and does not fare very well. So in order to get the Danes to leave, he offers them what he calls a Danegeld, 500 pounds of silver and gold, just leave us alone. Rollo, being a very smart man, realizing the end of the season's coming up, takes the gold, goes back home, uses it to build a very larger army, and come back the next year. Well, during the season change, father had died. New son said, yeah, weakling, I'm not paying these stupid Danes any money. So he shows up expecting to be paid to go home, and new French king, the impudent pup as he calls him, decides to throw a fight. So he sacks Paris. Holds it for a week as the French king rallies his troops to retake Paris, marches into an empty Paris. He's sacked again. The Danes took it, left, waited, and took it again. Now the French king, completely humiliated, realizing he's never going to win this fight, says, fine, I'm not going to give you money to leave. You stay here and fight for me. I make a list of demands. You must kiss my foot, convert to Christianity, and you can live here. And any Dane that comes across your land, you either fight them or have them join us. Rollo, being an older man, having a family of his own, goes, okay, cool. Here's what I'm going to do. This gentleman right here is going to kiss your foot. I'm not going to do that. And this warrior grabs the king's foot, knocking him off of his feet, kisses his foot, and throws his foot to the ground. In order to convert to Christianity, he married one of his Christian slaves in a Christian church and was married in the eyes of God. Hedging his bets, deciding, didn't want to put all his faith in one God, sacrificed 100 slaves to Odin, and built a church with a 500 pounds of silver and gold on his land. Dying, leaving his family this land, thinking he left himself a strong Norman presence here in France. Unbeknownst to him, his children growing up with French royalty became what's known as the Burgunds, warrior clan in France, very Christian, about Christian. In Burgundy, France was born. Ironically enough, the Queen of England is a distant descendant of him. Also, Vlad the Impaler is another one of the British monarchies. So that is a Danegeld, just paid to have me shut up for a minute. Any other points that I'm missing? Welcome, offertory. Oh, joys and sorrows. What is joys and sorrows? Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Yeah. Oh, really?
Wow.
Wonderful.
I have a twice, like that shoulder surgery 5 days ago. Wow. People said it was gonna but I walk.
I guess I have a story. A week ago, I threw a birthday party for my wife. And she's from Worcester. They told her just to invite everybody. So it's a party, so about 90 people. She had somebody there that she went to kindergarten, even high school, and all the grandchildren ran, which were 7 of them. It just went off well. So it just felt like a good post-COVID experience. Most of them hadn't seen each other in years now. So it went off. We weren't going to wait.
So negative turning into positive, and positive things go around. So they don't turn negative. So, any questions about anything else? Because I just don't know what else to ramble on about. I mean, we go into the mythology.
I thought that like, sorry, they started.
So Iceland was actually one of their trade posts. They started in Denmark, Finland, Sweden, what's known as the Scandinavian area. Think of them as different tribe states that were all beholden to many different kings. They interchanged ideas and even culturally proto-Germanic religions were actually kind of separated. So we believe in the same gods, you might call them different names. That's one reason why Odin has like almost 90 different names. It's ridiculous because there were so many different clans, there's so many different similarities that you can say that they're probably talking about the same.
Is it monotheistic?
No, it's polytheistic. There's many gods in some of the pantheons. So you'll hear of Odin, the All-Father. He is known as the King of the Asgardians, or the Aesir, as they're called. They're one clan of the gods who actually intermarried with others. So this is the part of the ideology of the religion that I find complex. It's almost like Game of Thrones. There's so many family clans that intermarry and diverge and fight and war over each other. Like for example, if you watch the modern movies of Marvel, you'll see that Thor and Loki are brothers. Not true, actually. Odin adopted Loki as a brother, knowing full well with pretense of what was going to happen. A little bizarre. But he is actually a half giant, or is a half Aesir, half giant god. Same thing with Thor. Thor's mother was a giant. And there's a lot of intermingling going on. So even certain things like cross-dressing was a thing. Cross-dressing was actually a very common thing. One of the biggest stories was Thor dressing up as his sister Freya in order to get back Mjolnir. So Loki goes and makes a bet with a giant for some game and loses terribly. And part of the prize was Thor's hammer. Just, I'm going to give this guy your card. And so Thor wakes up one morning and goes, "Where's my hammer?" And Loki goes, "Oh, the giant stole it. Sleeping so drunk last night and just passed out." And they came in and just stole it. And they try to get it back, and they try to play diplomatic. And the giant goes, "Well, okay, you want the hammer back? I want to marry Freya. Give me your daughter. Give me your god." And they're like, Loki's like, "No, this is good. Yes, promise them the hand of Freya. I've got this." And everyone's like, oh, okay, you got us into this mess, you get us out of this mess. So he convinces Thor to dress himself like Freya. Beautiful long blonde hair, beautiful dress, and shows up with a veil on to this giant's wedding. And there's a huge feast placed out, and Thor is just gobbling down, drinking kegs of mead and gallons of wine. And the giants are like, yo, Freya's like, okay over here. And Loki's like, yeah, you know, she didn't eat like 9 days in preparation of your wedding. She was so excited. And so the time comes for the wedding, and the the giant gives Freya Mjolnir, this sacred hammer, in order to like show that this is like how much I love you. And Thor, being Thor, goes, thanks, pulls the veil off, and just murks everybody. And so the story being ridiculous is very indicative of a lot of their mythology. A lot of the Asgard's walls were built by a giant who demanded certain prizes, and Loki goes, yeah, we can do this. He's never going to be able to build that wall all by himself. They put some restrictions on it. It's going to be him, his horse, and a sled, and that was it. In 1 year to do it. And the giant's like, okay. And everyone's like, well, he better not be able to finish this job. It gets all the way towards the end, and they actually had to, like, again, there's, hey, Loki, you got us into this mess. He's going to finish this wall. We're going to have to give him our daughter and marry her off. We don't want this. What are you going to do? So Loki, being the trickster god, seeing the wall builder come up over the mountaintop with the last load of stones that's going to finish this wall and complete his contract on time, Loki transforms himself into a beautiful mare and distracts the horse that's pulling the sled with the last stones and frolics off into the woods with it. And then Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse, is born and given to Odin to ride. That's actually where we get the 8 tiny reindeer. It's actually the 8 tiny horses, or the 8 tiny legs on one horse that Odin rode during what we call Christmas time, which they call Yule. He would show up at your house and feed you hay, or he would do terrible things to your house. So Santa is actually a modern interpretation of Odin's. But that story is very indicative of other ones. Like, so you might have heard of giant serpent that surrounds the world. There is a name. There's a giant serpent that was another prodigy child of Loki who had to get himself out of the mix and sleeping with a dragon and creating a giant snake. No big deal, no big deal. It's just a snake. Let's throw it in the ocean. It got big enough to surround the entire ocean. The end of time, you might have heard of a god named Fenrir, a giant wolf that was another prodigy child of Loki, another oopsie accident that became so big that Tyr, another god who was the strongest of the gods, actually tried to raise. And when he became a little afraid of this giant thing that's eating mountaintops, he goes, hey, Odin, we got to do something about this. So another amazing story of the gods fighting and trying to destroy and actually creating alliances with other gods from other places to try and defeat this golden wolf. Long story short, they couldn't do it, so they made another allyship with the dwarves to make a thin golden line that they tricked this wolf into putting around its neck that would hold it in place forever. But the wolf, being smart, goes, well, I don't trust you. You're going to put this around my neck. Someone's going to put their hand in my mouth. And Tyr, the guy that raised him, in the mouth, realizes that this might not be a good idea because we are tricking this wolf. The moment the line was secure around his neck and the wolf was captured, he realized he had been trapped and removed to God's hands. So Peter, the one-handed one. The tales are absolutely bonkers, and they're kind of amazingly funny in certain ways, and also kind of intriguing in others. There's a lot of mythology that's wrapped up into how did this happen? Here's a story. Is what I get a lot of, and those tales were told over time, and they're blown up into very big things. But at the base of it, they're actually pretty self-explanatory. But not. They're self-explanatory as to like how they finished the tale, but how it came to be, the progenitor of it, absolutely. Some of the stuff comes from it. That's why I'm interested in, because it's a reinterpretation where there's a modern movement to take the core tenets of it and use it for good. people were raiders and invaders and slave traders and did some pretty evil, horrible things, but they were very progressive for their time. Marriage laws were actually pretty practical. And had a form of divorce. They had inheritance. So a very interesting story is Helga the Deep-Minded. A great warrior king goes to England to battle the English and gain a reputation for himself and dies. And typically the war party would disband and go back home and try to find another person to follow. But Helga, being deep-minded, smart, and passionate, says, no, come with me. And she gets all the men on a ship and goes to a wasteland called Greenland and forms a city, forms a new language, a governing set of laws that actually later unified most of the Nordic tribes, but they were all following the same groups, just intersquabbling. And so she created a set of rules and laws that if you wanted to challenge me, if we were from different tribes, create the square. It meant like half your men on one side, half your men on the other. And they witnessed us duel. That way, if I won, the terms were set and nobody harmed anybody. There was no all-out war. There was rule, order. If we were to have differences in opinions, we couldn't fight each other unless we went to a third party. So the ability of rule of law was very important. I kind of find it fascinating that some of those are actually modern translated like into human rights. Part of a slave's rights, where you were fed 3 times a day, you were clothed, yes, you were chained, and you had your duties. But if you did your duties well enough, you could create enough honor to be absorbed into the family and actually have enough heraldry to receive things. So there are stories of African slaves that were brave enough, strong enough to be given their own dragon ships, land, and titles, and sent off to do other things. Entire parties of women where after the men had died, took up arms and finished the job that the men wanted to do, coming back with great riches from other lands. So yes, they were barbaric in certain ways, but they had a lot of about trying to make sure that the world grew. So modern paganism is trying to readapt that to modern age. There's a standard called if you see something that you deem to be evil, claim it to be evil and give your enemies no peace. So if you see something, you have to say something. I believe this is wrong. I have to do everything in my power to stand up against it. Very big in the community. They're pushing towards using that as a rally cry towards justice, rights, LGBTQ rights. I don't know, I'm getting feedback now. Trying to revamp an old warrior tradition into a modern, we call shield walls instead of a physical shield wall. We call shield walls for people. A couple months ago, there was a content creator who was a YouTube artist, came out as him and got a lot of flack online to the point where people actually physically showed up at her house to harass her. So she called on a couple of friends who just so happened to be Norse pagans, and they put on full regalia, face paint, and created a shield wall around her house to get her out of the house, into a car, and off to work. Ridiculous, but kind of amazing at the same time. I kind of like when you hear about abused children and then a bunch of bikers show up to like make sure that kid goes where he needs to go. I like that ability to stand up for your fellow neighbor, literally, not just figuratively, and like put a sign out in your yard that says "I'm now." I like get out there, put a shield wall up. It stops people. Yes, there's actually a large group of what's known as the All-Fathers. So Norse paganism has had a influx of white supremacists, usually through an ideology of a picture in the 1800s of Thor with a winged helmet, and in his belt buckle is a swastika. And of course, Germans wanting to be a superior race jumped on that boat. And there is a strong belief that you have to be Scandinavian or white to be, and that's absolutely, categorically not true. So part of the movement is Odin is the all-father, not the son father, not the father of these people, father of all. So we kind of push towards the fact that we have Black Vikings historically, we have Arab Vikings historically. We did not discriminate via race. We discriminated basically on prowess. There's actually a large community of Norse pagans that are fighting alongside natives because we had a mixed history here in Finland. When Vikings showed up, they called the natives here brave, very brave warriors, but they called them the screaming people because their war cries were high pitched and screaming. They saw their arms and armaments as kind of backwards, so they decided they wanted to trade. There was a little back and forth. There was some chest pumping, and some battles did happen, but it was never really fully. There was never a good treaty put in place between Norse and Native. So there's a big push now to we're here. We're here to support you, but there's a lot of relationship between the two cultures. Or a lot of relationships between the two cultures. So there's a huge push towards what's known as native Vikings, where there's Vikings that are going to native communities and speaking. They're going to raid or be mercenaries. A couple of people are actually at the pipelines that are being built and putting up tent cities and doing shield walls for canisters of tear gas being shot at them and that kind of thing. So the Viking community is all about protection and trying to stand up for kin, kith, and family. And so we're stretching out. We're finding our families here. One reason why I adopted Norse paganism is because it's a very you principle. It's what do you have? What do you have to show? Bring it to the table. We'll bring ours to the table and we make it a little better. It's stone soup in religious ideology. And I enjoy the ability to walk this path around you. I mean, we went to another church for a speaking engagement for IHN the other day, and I was getting some very interesting looks.
You took what? I'm sorry.
Sorry. So Sherry, a couple of weeks ago, had to go to another church for a talking point about IHN. So we took a Sunday off here, and we went to another very kind of church. And oh boy, did I feel like that little kid again, where I walked in and went, "You look it." What? I noticed a lot of people kind of doing this to their crucifix on their neck, and I'm just like, okay. So I think the reason I chose this as my talking point today is because I think that there's so much misconception and misunderstanding and division that, yes, there's been a varied history of these people, but I like the revamp. I like the direction they're going. They're taking a good stance at taking something that's been whitewashed and muddied by time and rebuilding, making it stronger than it was before, making it mean something good.
Like, I don't know, like dogma or doctrines or like tenets or
No and yes.
to belong
There-
to do things.
Nope. There is, in order to be consider yourself a Norse pagan, you really only have to believe in three major things. Self-service, meaning you have to be good to yourself, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. Sacrifice to your family and your community around you. Community is a core tenement. If you are on that ship together, you might not share any blood with your brothers. If you're working the farm together, you all deal with either making the blades, to plow the soil, to reap the harvest, to process the harvest. Everybody played a part, whether that be farming the fields or raiding the fields. Norse paganism looks at it as if you're willing to look at the path and willing to walk it, it is a solitary path. You're going to walk your path and you're going to have a different way than I am. I'm never going to say that, oh, that's the wrong way. You have to do 3 sacrifices a day and it has to be the religious doctrine is basically be strong for yourself, be strong for the family around you, be willing to explore, be willing to step outside of your comfort zone, be who you are, be authentic to yourself, but be willing to negotiate, move out into the world. I mean, think of these people. They moved from Scandinavia to Istanbul and were willing to talk about it. They could have gone in there and tried to pick up a fight and be the brave, strong warrior, but they knew that conversation is usually the best way. So trade and understanding one another, valor, honor, loyalty, duty, respect are the core. And you can interpret those very personally. Like If I were to follow the Hamaval, technically a man is not supposed to leave his house without a spear by his side. You never know where your enemies may be. That's very harsh word. When we think about the time framing, yeah, your neighbor was probably out to kill you to take your land and your stuff. Or if not, a raiding group was. I think of it as, what do you interpret it as a weapon? My tongue can be a weapon. My words can be a weapon. My fist can be a weapon. I can be. I don't need a spear.
When you say Hamabel, I came in back.
But
Is the Hamabel like a text? Or
yes.
Like a
So it's a
story?
collection of texts. So a lot of these, again, a lot of what I'm referring to when I say the Hamaval, which are the words of Odin or the sagas, are poetic stories that were orally told through song and poetry for many, many, many years, and were finally written down right around the conversion of Christianity. So there's a lot of Christian influence in them, but those are the only real written sources. We have tiny fragments of runic inscriptions that are the traditional way, but again, bits and pieces and tiny little hooks of fragments here and there. And when I talk about the Hamaval, or these are just the stories that have been kind of collected, put down on paper, and have been reinterpreted and reinterpreted, and are still being reinterpreted because we're finding new runes that are creating different texts, or the same thing just written slightly different in different ways. So it's a reconstructionist issue. We're looking at something through the lens of hundreds of years of being squashed, crushed, and pushed away and whitewashed. I mean, towards the rebirth of wearing of the Thor's hammer tradition, they didn't wear it. They didn't need a protection for their own protection. The renaissance of wearing Thor's hammer was actually an iconography that was very closely assimilated to a Christian cross. Very little details like the curved arm that would be worn upside down to blend in. It was actually a sign of revolt. It was like wearing a cross upside down. Ooh, Christian. Like, the Icelandic poems that were written down were usually generational. The story of my great-great-grandfather, Leif, who went to another land and saw fields of green as far as the eye can see, and it was endlessly summer, and there was fruit trees as far as you can see. It was a mythical land, like almost, there was actually stories told about a mythological land to the far west where there was no people, no war, no slave traders. It was like a prosperity land, the golden land. It had been seen and told about in one story and told over hundreds of generations before it was finally written down as a story. Well, coming to conclusion, looking at the paths that they went to, we found where they landed. There was actually a small settlement up in BC, Canada that traded for about a good 60 to 80 years before it was abandoned and left. It was logging. There was a lot of logging and fur trade with the natives. There was a couple squabbles back and forth, but Vineland was a cranberry bog. You've seen vines everywhere from cranberry bogs. Going into Finland, Vineland, land of plenty. And they never really got very far into the coast, but it was such a poetic story that even later explorers would make shifts to try and go to this possible glory land where we grew just wildly for hundreds of miles. So yeah, a little grain of truth in some of those stories. There's actually, I believe it's in Vermont or Connecticut, there's something called the standing stones or soldier stone. There's a couple of stones found in field that had runic inscriptions on it. Late research realizes that yes, it looks like a Danish sailor, a tradesman, came across, got swept up, landed on the coast of somewhere here in the eastern seaboard, and made it as far as Connecticut before laying his men to rest with an epitaph carved into a stone. It was thought to be a fake for about 70 years until a runic expert looked at it and went, no, it fits the period, it's older through there. He talked about it and then looked through some sagas and found the missing. He was a bigwig's grandson who was trying to get himself some trade name. He wouldn't go to war, but he wanted to go to trade and got lost, never to be seen from again. Landed here somewhere. Am I done talking here? Anything anybody wants to ask me that I can clarify?
How long have you been following this path?
About a year and a half, 2 years. I kind of came into it soft. I looked at it like I just noticed a lot of chatter about it, and I kind of saw the internal struggle of, this is who we want to be, not what we've been told we've been made out to be. Again, the white supremacy thing pushed a lot of people away from it because the way the symbol really is to kind of put yourself in the crosshairs. I like the community. I like the ability to look at it like if you're standing for something, it's something that's just not you. Like it's more than you. You're the sum of many parts. If you're gonna stand up for something, stand up. Literally stand up, walk over and put yourself between harm's way, whether that be words, deeds, or even bad practice. Stand up, put yourself in front of it. Right. I mean, it's a okay. So people joke around. They're like, "Oh, anything crazy happening today?" And I'm like, no. And I don't think 99.9% of the time, I don't think anything really crazy will ever happen. But if that one time ever happened, I want someone to be there, and if I don't want to see anybody else get into a scrap with a place that they don't need to be, that's what I do. That's what I'm trained to do. That's what I would rather do. I've always said I would rather go and fist fight somebody for you than try and like do this. And if you were to be like, Sean, go beat that guy up right now, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, so I'm still walking it and I'm still trying to figure out how I fit into it, how it fits around me and adapting it into different portions of my life. So like kind of when she asked me, she's like, does anybody do you want to take a sun? And I'm like, we talk about Norse paganism all the time. She's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay. And then the day came and I'm like, should I actually do something here?
Another question. I'm thinking, is there like a course of what you're talking about, the Norse force, is that right? A Norse force, like at a national level?
Oh, international level. There's a
politics, but you know what I mean? Like candidates or
I don't know about the political aspect of it. I don't know of any confirmed Norse pagans that are running for office anywhere, but I do know that Norse paganism has been recognized as an open religion here in the United States to the point where even in the military people can throw a beard. To get into something that I disagree with the new upcoming with the faith, people are using archaeological evidence as religious institution. So there's a group of soldiers that are growing their beards long, which is against most military policies. You're supposed to have to be clean shaven. You can have a mustache, but it can't exceed the corners of your lips. It cannot cover the, like, they have very strict rules on this. And this push of, yes, Norse paganism is a recognized religion. How does it interfere with the religious aspect of the military? So they've pushed archaeological evidence that men were usually ordained with beads and long braids, and tattoos were a thing. And so they're using that little bit of evidence, little kernel of truth as like, oh, this is the way. I put beads in my beard because I think it's a lot of fun and I grow a beard. Do I think that it makes my religious connection to the gods any deeper? No, I've always had a beard. I just get to play with it now. That's really about it. Personal adornment was actually, again, part of that reputation thing. So you might have heard of Harold Forked beard. He had two very large braids in his beard and it looked like two giant forks. Blood hair. Before battles, he would literally put blood in his hair to frighten his enemies. Harold Hardrada. Hardrada directly translates to hairy pants or hairy pantaloons. And that comes from the sagas when he went to fight his enemies. And his enemies knew that he'd never win with a sword, so they strew the field with poisonous snakes. He wore hairy pants, so the snakes couldn't bite him. And so Harold Hardrada was born. That whole ideology of creating either such a terrible, fearsome name that like Thor kills the tall. He was so tall, he was known to pick men up in battle and use them if they still clutched their weapons. That sounds terrifying, right? Imagine coming up across an old, like there's this giant dude over there and he goes, and pick somebody up, you're gonna go, nope. And so that force of your name, that son of Orkbeard, son of Harold Hardrada, carried on. So generational luck was a thing. They believed you could pass on luck by both totem, so I could hand off good luck to you. If I had good luck naturally, I could give you good luck by giving you a totem of like, you're going in my name, take this, here, this is good for you. Luck could also be hereditary. It was uncommon for older warriors to know they weren't going to die in the field of battle and therefore weren't going to get a glorious death, and the Valkyries might not even look at them to take them to Valhalla, would be slain in battle by their own sons, because that way the luck would pass on to them. So the belief of Valhalla is another real deep misconception of modern paganism versus post-paganism. Valhalla is a real place. It's Hall of Odin, and Odin is calling his greatest warriors. So he has Valkyrie that goes to the battlefields and finds the bravest souls to come to him to fight nonstop all day until their death, and then we're resurrected at night where they feast all night and drink and party with their friends and then die in the morning again. Like it's just a continual cycle of death and eating until Ragnarok, until the end of times when Odin needs his best warriors. And so when you hear of these brave warriors wanting to get to Valhalla, 99.9% of the time, that's actually not true. Most people didn't want to go to Valhalla unless you were just like, this is my life, this is all I do. Then yeah, maybe that's where you wanted to end up. The majority of people ended up in what's known as Helheim or Hell, 1L, H-E-L, and Loki's half god daughter. She was a half giant, born half dead, half alive. So she is in the land of death, where everything lives. The story of the walls of hell being a lush green paradise, and when you lop off the head of a chicken and throw it across the border, the chicken comes back to life. It's everlasting green, nothing ever dies. You're reunited with pretty much everybody, except for maybe crazy Uncle Harold, who was just that battle freak who ended up in Valhalla. But other than that, there were so many different gods with different halls that if you were a great farmer, you were such a farmer that you grew the best crops, you might end up in Freya's hall. Freya was the goddess of harvest, love, and household. You could be a great tradesman or textile or sculptor and end up in different places. So if you looking at it like, was there a heaven or a hell? Was there like a one true path to follow? You really had to like target your goal. If I'm going to be the best merchant, I got to follow this god and be the best merchant. He only came the best merchant. If I wanted to be the best farmer, I had to follow Freya, and I had to be the best farmer. So being the best at what you were doing, whatever that was, wasn't even a guarantee that you would get to go where you wanted to go. Because the Valkyrie got to choose. The Valkyrie were just there to go, all right, Helheim, whoop, Jotunheim, Niflheim, Freya.
Right.
Right, it's the sorting hat. So I kind of like this whole idea of Vitriol Valhalla. No, there's actually historical evidence that proves that a lot of people that were wanting to get into Valhalla were trying to take the cheap way out. So if I were dying, I would have you kill me by a sword with a sword in my hand, so I may look like I died a warrior's death. I didn't know I was getting into, but it looked good. Most of them wanted to get into Valhalla because you get to eat meat every night. That was a big driving goal to getting into Valhalla, is you got meat every single night. But hey, whatever your motivation is. Personally, I'd like to go to that place, heaven. Those streets of gold need some revamping. Motivation. I think I should stop talking now. I feel like the class is bored.
No, not for
What?
fascinating.
Yes.
And the cool thing about it is I am still digging through stuff. I'm still looking. If you're actually interested in picking up a book that might, explain it a heck of a lot better than I am, Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology is a very easy read. He translates it verbatim, but he actually gives you a lot of more like, and this is kind of what happened. Synopsis version. Jackson Crawford's translation of the Hamabal, he calls it the cowboy Hamabal because he is from like Colorado, cowboy hat, Texan voice. He does the translation of the Hamabal that's very easy to read, and he does what he calls his interpretation, which I think lend a lot of credence to how relatably translatable they are. So if you're interested in either of that, that would be a good place to start. Other than that, feel free to ask me questions. I'll do some research for you. Thank you.
So next week, just so you know, we are going to be off-site. We will be at the Beaver Brook Dog Park on Man Street. There is parking available at the Chandler Street exit lot there. Bring a puppy, bring a friend. Like I said, informal puppy play date.
If you just want to come and play with puppies,
If
that's
you just
okay
want,
too.
if you just want to come and play with puppies, that's great too. So everybody knows that will be hosted by the Keepers.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for dealing with it.
Keepers.